So this is what I said on Beyond Belief. I just returned from Colorado where I shot an episode of Beyond Belief with George Newry, which was a really thrilling experience. And what I said on there was I was given a philosophy that would help any person ascend and really reach the state in their lives where they could be happy and live the life they're meant to have. And they would also contribute to the world because now they're understanding who they are and they can live this great life and they can help the evolution of all that is. And we're moving through a planetary ascension at this time, which is why it's been so challenging and difficult for many, many people. And that's why I wanted to do the information or give the information. And it was a wonderful interview. And George is just the greatest person to receive this. So when we began the interview, they played a clip from a channeling session. I had to become willing to show people how I receive information and how this has healed my life because he also wanted to know about mind-body connection. And that's everything that I was given. When we come into the world, we have no idea who we're going to become. It is an adventure in our consciousness. We all have it. And so when he asked about individual ascension, I said that is personal development. That's self-actualization. It's whatever, how someone thinks of it. I think of it as also ascension because we're in physical bodies for a while. It's about how can we make a difference? How can we live the lives we're supposed to have? And it's in our consciousness. However, our consciousness has been programmed. It's been programmed by who we are, our unique DNA, what we've learned in our lives, what we've believed from others. That is how we then individually come to understand who we are. But then we have changes that happen in our society, and we've seen them, and we know that we're moving through a change right now. And I said, so when that happens, there are certain people who can give more information that can help things become better, and I was one of those people. But accepting that was really, really challenging. So he asked me about Wilhelm, where did that come from? And I said, well, in 1988, I was like moving through this really difficult time in my life and I needed some help. And I heard about automatic writing and I just said, let me try it. And as I sat down to try it for a few days, because I had been meditating, I knew about that, but I always did things in a very different way, even in my meditations. But I said, let me what is going to happen when the information started coming through. I told him it frightened me and I put it away. I didn't want to even look at it because how am I understanding this? And then I'm using that to start to create work and businesses and performing all that. But then I also went through everything horrible during that entire time as I'm receiving this information. And but I knew that there was something that I had, and I just could put it away. And that's what most of us do because something will be given to us or we'll think about it or it comes in our intuition and then we don't believe it. And I did that. But it was purposeful though, because I could not help anyone else come to believe unless I had moved through my own disbelief. But when I told him that, I said, I received a message in 1989 that told me that I had this ability, but I was also afraid of it. And I'll show you the message, and so it'll make a little more sense to you. So what I explained is that we each evolve in our consciousness over time. We can think of it as we go to school, we learn something, we ingest information, and then we learn something more, and it keeps going on. Well, our collective consciousness does the same thing, meaning the consciousness that we have access to in our world. And there are different ways that that is elevated, so to speak, and we're doing that now. We can think about it with artificial intelligence. We didn't know we were going to be able to do that a long time ago, and it keeps getting more and more. So when I received this, it was challenging. And the message was repeated again this year because um, it takes a while for us to use our time, linear time, to understand something, and that's been the case for me. But the message, again, given this year on February 19th was, here is another ascension gift. These messages and a live conversation from February 19th, 2012 will aid you today. Following is the ebook we mentioned. And if you go to the website, Any Advice for Today, you can access this because it is there on the date on February 19th of 2023. So they took me back to the original message, and here it is. Yes, it is indeed wise for you to realize how powerful you are and also to acknowledge the innate benevolence of your being. You seem to consistently maintain a subtle fear that somehow you would use your power in an ego oriented way to the detriment of others. The truth for you is exactly the opposite. For the more you gain, you give away. The anger you sense or hostility at times, as you have also been aware of it, is not truly directed at others but merely a reflection of your inner frustration with the intellectual knowledge of your power and your simultaneous restriction of that power, which causes friction. It is everyone's power to do with as they please, and your individual way is becoming more clear and purposeful for you. Be careful of the instilled limitations which would not have you own your worth. Relax and enjoy. Now, that was the message I received there. And again, I lived these 35 years receiving more and more, and I go, what is it turning into? And then it turned into a philosophy. But you come to understand that everything you experience is in your consciousness, and it's up to you to decide to take the steps to break through the restrictions, because that's all we ever have. And the restrictions that we're going through now, because of the planetary ascension, have been really challenging. So when they mentioned anger, the anger that we each feel is when we can't do something, when we can't get something to work in our lives the way we want it to, or when we can't get the world to work in the way that we want it to. Then it brings up our internal anger because we know that somewhere we have an ability that we're not willing to access, own, or believe in. And that's what went on for me. So we talked about all of that. And then I also mentioned that um, I didn't understand where the name Wilhelm came from. It took 30 years for it to be revealed. And then told the story, and this will all be on the episode. As I said, I lived in Chicago in 1978, just before I moved to New York, and I lived on a street called Goethe in Dearborn. I didn't know what the name Goethe meant because it was a weird spelling. I didn't understand it. And then years later, I started to see something that was really strange. I saw a Myers-Briggs personality test that there was an advocate. I'd taken the test years ago. I didn't know why it was on my phone that day. I read it, and then there's a quote from Goethe. Then I come to discover years later that he wrote something called Wilhelm Meister, The Search for Self-Actualization. Well, that's been my entire life. So, how did I make that connection? Wilhelm says that was a clue. We all are given clues. We all have a connection to source. We have a connection to the universe, and we're given clues to look at what that is so we can remember. Wilhelm gave us a message on January 1st of 2012 saying we all have infinite intelligence because whatever has been existed before in the cosmos, it's here. We just have to be willing to access that information if it's going to be purposeful for our lives. And when we do, we start to understand who we are. We start to find our life purpose, and then we start to move to what we're meant to do. George also asked, do you think everyone has this life purpose? I said, yes, because I've seen it for years, 30 some years of coaching, 35 years. I said I coached thousands. So I've seen it. And the only problem anyone has is that they don't believe themselves or they have fear. That's the other big one. And so I had so much of it throughout all of my life, which is why in 2019, I wrote the book Overcoming Fear. And I mentioned that on the show as well. So it's going to be interesting to see how many people will start to look at that because I've already heard so many people receive value simply from reading that when I addressed every bit of fear and stuff that I've gone through in my life that was unbelievable. That's what went on. And there was another interesting thing that happened just today. I wrote an article 2 years ago. Well, it was October of 2022. I think it's about that. You can find it on my website, rogerburnley.com. And it says that I might be channeling Carl Jung. And because I had never studied him, I didn't know much about him, but when I started seeing things, I go, wait a minute, his information seems really aligned with what Wilhelm has given me all these years. So then last year I started reading or listening to the Red Book because it was only put out in 2019. It had been put away for years and years and years because people didn't want to see it and it was confusing. I started listening to it. I go, wow, I really understand this. Why is that? So this morning I finished it. It was 20 hours, but I finished it. And at the very end, Carl Jung is saying, oh, he wanted to thank Wilhelm. I, that was interesting. There was a Richard Wilhelm that he had worked with and that had helped him with so many different things. There was a connection there, and they really loved this about the intelligence and the collective unconscious, understanding that. And when we all understand that, then we have a very different world. So he asked me, well, what was so significant about 2012? He had already had so many people talking about the Mayan calendar and all of that. I didn't know anything about that, except Wilhelm gave me something back then on the date where everyone thought the world was going to end on December 21st, 2012. Well, Wilhelm said, no, wait. Gave me a one message word, wait, meaning that we were building something new. We were building a new world, and the way we were going to do that is by destruction of the old, to take away all the limiting ideas and beliefs that we might have had. So then George, his eyes got really big because I said, I knew this. And so I went back and I knew it a long time ago in 2016 because I wrote an article about racism and misogyny. I said, I might be racist. And George's eyes got so big, and you'll see that on the episode when it airs. But I said, yeah, I had to acknowledge that because, see, we all have it. If we're not looking at it, we're not changing anything. And it's not that I was, racist about others, but it just gets instilled within you, these ideas and beliefs. There's no reason. Why would anyone be born racist? It's something you learn and you've been taught, and it's generational. And also, why are we still putting women, making them less? These are things that we have not answered. Why would a human being be less than another? Wilhelm said, you're all souls, and there are no hierarchy of souls. And this is what we figure out throughout our lives. But at different times, there are things that need to be addressed, and this is what we're moving through now. Then you start to understand that things are also about our emotions. And I just did a little research on that because we think sometimes our emotions are not affecting what is going on in our lives or our bodies or in the world. Guess what? There's new research that says, yes, it is. And scientists are figuring this out. And there's quantum sciences and all these things that people coming up with. We're all connected. Everything in the universe is energy. And so when we can understand how we're using our energy in a productive way, we create something really great. But we're going to move through a period where not everyone's going to do that. And so then we have to decide, how are we going to live our lives and what energy are we going to put into the world? How much of the limitations are we going to move through within ourselves? Because, see, that's where they exist. Not about any other person, it's just within each individual. And so the more of us who become willing to own who we are and move to a higher state of consciousness, then we have a very different world. And everything is consciousness. We will just access it at different times and in different ways, but then you start to have healing. So then I went through and he says, well, do you think everything can be healed? I said, well, I don't. I've healed so much that I couldn't tell you because I know that I might discover a little bit more. Someone else might discover a little bit more because I told him about my cluster headaches. And I posted this. I put a video out about how I healed my cluster headaches. And you will see if you do a search, they'll tell you that there's no cure for cluster headaches. And I'm saying, yes, there is, because I figured it out. Because, see, what I was doing was running from myself. That's where you find out that most mind body conditions are that problem, where we're not willing to own our authentic selves, and then our bodies start to go a little crazy. Now, that's not for everything, but for me, that was exactly it. And so I told him about my frustration too, because when I was young, my grandmother was just this devout Christian Scientist, and I never saw her sick. I said one day she was in bed with a cold or something. But then I also understood that she spent every single day in the morning sitting down and studying something. She was studying her books, as she called them. It was like a Bible and then the Christian Science workbook and all of those things that she was using every single day. And then I start, oh, that's science. See, because it's neuroscience. When you're changing your brain every single day, then you're going to start to understand and you reach a higher state of consciousness. And she was demonstrating it. And I said to her, but I'm sick all the time. And I have all these horrible things that are going on. What's wrong? And she says, you work to the level of your understanding. So, what that told me was we can get to a place where we understand so much more about our consciousness that we could heal so much. It, ooh, wow. George says, well, do you think everything can be healed that way? Okay, possibly. I'm still figuring it out because I did other things as well. And so, information I give to others, they'll probably take that and then discover new things that will cause more to happen because we can go to a higher state of consciousness where we can really transcend our bodies. And then we're living in this other state. Now, that doesn't even seem like it makes sense, but it does. So then I told him when I was told me that when Wilhelm told me I was given everything in 2012, and I spent years doubting that that had happened. And they also said I was given a message. If I met someone on their birthday, I was given a message that would resonate for them now. We have this idea about time that we haven't figured out yet. And there have been great people like an Einstein and all that to talk about time is only happening right now. And see, that was the other thing that I mentioned in the show when I healed the cluster headaches. It was a hint that I got actually from Eckhart Tolle, tell us saying there's no pain in the moment of now when you're in the present moment. I thought, oh, let me try that. But it took time because I had to change my brain. But there is a process, so anyone can accomplish this. And I had to tell him, yeah, I figured out anyone could do this if they chose to. But the only problem is they won't believe it. And I didn't believe it either. So that was the other part. So I went to find George's birthday because it was June 4th. And I didn't have time to send it to them, but I'm going to show you this. So Wilhelm has said that, we evolve over time. So recently, in this last year or more, they started putting messages on different years to understand that we don't get everything all at once. I received it precognitively, but I still have to study, and I've mentioned that many times before as well. But this one was really quite fascinating because there's no accidents, there is alignment. And when I saw this, I thought, wow, this would be fascinating for George to know, but it came through this year. Today will make more sense. Now, that was, I had no idea before I was going that this was going to happen because I didn't know at that time it was his birthday. But it will happen when you read our message a year ago on this date and examine your life and world. You are here to manifest brilliance, but you do so a bit at a time. We have never left you. Whatever you may be experiencing in your life or world is for the greatest good of all, especially you. You are expanding and ascending continuously. That means you are doing that, and as is your planet and everyone who exists in physical form at this time of transition. The next and most helpful part of your journey un- will be understood as you study our message on this date 2012. When you resist change within yourself, there is no possibility for you or your world to become more or better, which is a term you will interpret in your way. So the message on June 4th, which was for George, was flexibility is admirable and also indicates your willingness to trust the integrity of your physical life experience. Conversely, inflexibility is a sign that you believe you already know it all and are unwilling to expand or accept new information and wisdom. Your goal is always to gain new experiences, for they bring you more awareness. You are always making choices as to whether or not it is more critical for you to be right in your own thinking or more important to evolve continually. Conflicts with others are born in inflexibility, while cooperation brings momentum or forward progression, meaning expansion. And that's what we're meant to do now because we have so many. We're going to have things where we're going to see people are inflexible. They don't want to accept something new, which is why we're having all the conflicts now, because we are meant to evolve and change, and that has to happen or occur when we let go of what was old, either within us or our collective consciousness of that of the world. So that's pretty much what I told him, but they also played a clip from a channeling session which laid it out beautifully. Then they played some testimonials from people that I have worked with who have used this work, but they were older ones, so from years ago, and it made me emotional. And George says, "Why did you get emotional?" I go, "Because that's all I want to see." It's people who have come to understand who they are. And that's what's happened for them. And the more of us who can accept our importance and love ourselves, we have a very different world. But we're going to move through a period where everyone's not going to do that. So we have to decide which choice we're going to make for ourselves. And then when you make the choice that you're going to love yourself, the magical thing that happens is you start to heal in many different ways that I could never have explained before this. And I said to George, I could not believe that I'm at 73 and all these physical things are now changed and healed. And I'm going to see how much more I can do. Everyone can do that. And that's the work that I'm giving. But I told him I've been reluctant mystic too, because I needed to know that all of this was real and it made sense. And I was it was difficult because I'm really introverted. Now, people said that doesn't make sense. And then I knew Carl Jung was the same one. And he gave me the information that understood that. That's why his book didn't get published for so many years. He too wanted to know if this was really going to do something. And it's changed the world. And I know that the work that I have will change the world because it's already doing that. We each have to decide if what we can do in our lives is it's going to give us the kind of understanding that we can put into the world then, and then we all change. That's really what happens. But you have to become willing to discover who you are. The other thing is we will find that most people are not going to want to do self-examination because it's easier to blame everyone else and become and stay angry whether rather than deciding I'm going to look at myself and move through these things. And that's what I did my entire life, which is why I started with the racism and misogyny, because I could get to a higher understanding of consciousness and then I could put that into the world. That's what it is. But my hiding out is going to be over now because they told me they all, when I was done with the session, I'm just going to say this, I came out because George asked me to channel. And when I began to channel, I don't know what came through. I can't tell you that, but I do know that Wilhelm went right to George and they talked about that message because they thanked him because for years he's been bringing new information to break down the barriers that many of us carry about what is possible to be done, what is possible in the world. And because when we don't accept that, then we go into fear because we have a natural affinity to fear the unknown. And when the world is changing as quickly as it is, we're going to have a lot more fear. That's why I wrote the fear book in 2019, which is surprising because that's the same time that Carl Jung released, not Carl Jung, but his organization released the Red Book. Is that a coincidence? There are so many others that are there, but there aren't any. You are in the world at the right time to evolve, ascend, and create a really wonderful life and contribute to our world. And that's the message that I'm giving to everyone. And now that's going to be seen by what they told me that now Gaia's membership is up to 1 million people. But then something else happened. When I was leaving, they said, would you be interested in this other show, Coast to Coast? I go, oh, yeah, that's the big one on Coast to Coast AM. And then I looked and I said, wow, that gets about 3 million listeners a month. That's what's that going to do? From the person who's been wanting to hide out. And if you're feeling that you've been hiding out, now's the time for you to own yourself because we all have something to bring to the world. All I did was create a pathway for everyone to do that. All right. See you soon.